which is good. True. So, yeah.
All right. Well, you guys start with your perspective
On conflict, on how to handle conflict. Okay.
Yeah, or like where you want to go with this.
Yeah. So, I mean, my thoughts around it were around just, especially some of the things that I've learned recently that are relearned, I would say, because, it's easy to forget things that you have figured out and to get sucked into conflict. So I guess my thing on it would be, what causes the conflict, how to avoid having the conflicts or having them go bad. And then really, I think the perspective from both the male and the female, man and woman, what as a man can you do to have better conflicts, higher quality conflicts that are constructive, because conflict isn't bad by itself, but constructive conflicts, and then in the same that you could present your side of what is it as a woman, and there's some commonality too, right? Things that both people can do always to better communicate. And I guess we don't really have to go over like the standard 4 horsemen of,
Can you remember all 4 precisely? Because I mean, I know one of them.
Right. One is criticism.
Oh, I thought it was defensiveness.
Okay, I think that's.
I think one of them is.
But we'll just talk about from our perspective, even though those are, because everyone talks about the 4 horsemen. So, yeah. So I mean, what do you think about?
Well, normally you're supposed to start with your perspective, but if you want me to start, I mean, conflict is a very broad thing.
Yeah,
so I know
broad.
that you kind of laid out how you want to talk about it. So the first thing you said was what causes it?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's obvious that like hurt causes the conflict, and because that's where all issues start, right? Like even if somebody's like, hey, like you did this and it made me feel this way, like that's still, they got hurt somehow.
Yeah.
So I think it all stems from feelings got hurt, someone got hurt, or they're feeling a certain type of way about something, but normally it's like hurt or upset or what, those sort of group of emotions. And what's really hard is that when you're feeling those emotions, it can kind of overpower your like logical thinking brain in that moment, right? Because I know a thing that us women tend to do when we're hurt is sometimes lash out at the same time, like verbally or, whatever. And we allow our emotions to kind of take over, and we're not really responsible for what we do when we're upset, which I don't think is okay.
Right.
And I'll talk more about that at the end. But, typically where I think conflict like goes awry is that those hurt feelings like take over everything, and they become this like destructive thing. Like now you're hurt by what somebody did, so you're going to hurt them, or you're going to like show them how hurt you are, or you're going to like, get revenge, you know, and then obviously the other person is going to be hurt and want the same things. Yeah. So it's like that typically is where a lot of people end up like having crazy, full-blown, like hour-long, intense fighting conversations. Like, I'm not saying that we have it to that level, but a lot of people have it to that level, and it's very normal, like, and they almost normalize it. Because I mean, we've even had talks, with our daughter where, sometimes she'll be like, well, I was upset, so I didn't mean it. Where it's like, which we're trying to teach her, like, even though you're upset, even if you're angry, even if you're hurt, you don't lash out on people, or you like, you have to still handle it a certain way. And so, I think that's very important, especially for women. Cause like I said, we do typically like kind of go more towards like, oh, you hurt me, like it's on from there. But I think that's not the right way to handle it. And even if you try to be really careful about what you say, you might still say something that hurts somebody. So I think it, is important to look at it in a way that we've talked about, which I don't want to like steal your whole thing here, but when you look at it from a place of like being vulnerable, which I think when you're like looking at it more from being vulnerable, it makes you come from a place where you're like, you're not attacking, you're like, I don't want to say helpless, but you're kind of like a little like,
you're putting your heart into the other person's hands,
right?
And trusting that they'll deal appropriately,
right?
With
you're
it.
not trying to like guard yourself from it, like you're fully open. Like it can be scary, but you're coming from this place of like love and like true emotion, and not allowing the like anger or what, like the part that wants violence or whatever to like overtake, right? Or like the part that like wants to guard it yourself. So you're on like high alert and you're like, I must protect my heart at all costs.
Right.
So what you and I have talked about is protecting the other person's heart and, looking out for them, which will lead to more constructive criticism type of conversations, and not allow there to be that sort of like combativeness that a lot of conflicts turn into.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like I'm like taking this whole thing over.
I mean, I think that's a good summary of it. And I would say on that point, like the thing that initially starts the conflict is some kind of miscommunication, or it is a hurt, right? I guess that's what we could say is it's a hurt in some way. And I think that the more close you are with a person, the more the hurt is, even slight things, because when you feel like you're side by side and they're like, this person really gets me, they understand everything about me and I understand them and we're so close, then any degree of separation feels like a huge harm, because you're like, my reality is shattered now. I guess she doesn't get me as much as I thought, or I guess it's like, or she must be doing it on purpose, or he must be doing it on purpose because we know each other. Well,
and your partner's supposed to be the closest person to you, so obviously when there's miscommunication or hurt somehow, like your brain automatically wants to be like, but how could this person do this to me? Or like, like I thought I knew them, like your brain can spiral, and that's where you end up kind of going down that bad road.
Right.
Whereas if you like don't come at it from that perspective, like we've talked about, where you're like, I know who this person is. I know they wouldn't hurt me.
Right.
Like this is just obviously something that we need to talk about and work through in a positive way. I mean, as positive as you can. Like there's still going to be some sort of emotion because like I said, there's usually hurt attached to it somehow. But if you come at it with love as like the core like attribute, and like who that person is, rather than feeling betrayed, because when you feel betrayed, then you can spiral and you come up with all these other problems, and then you start throwing those in there, and then now you're like talking about a whole bunch of other stuff, which I have done.
Like, we've all done that.
But not perfect.
And that's what I was going to say, is that you come in initially with some kind of hurt for whatever reason. And then it either goes one of two ways. Either you interpret that hurt as you come to the person and say, you've hurt me, or you're angry because you're like hurt goes one of those two ways. And it's like, if you choose the path to be, you hurt me and now I am upset at you for hurting me, that's the protecting your own heart pathway.
Right.
Versus the, you hurt me and now I'm going to be vulnerable about that hurt and give you my heart even further, trusting that you're going to do the right thing. And it's like, it's hard. I think most of the time we want to do the thing that we know that we can take care of ourselves. So if we do this one, it's like, you have control over that situation. But if you do the other one and say, okay, well, here it is. And the risk is that the person may not react in the right way.
Right.
In addition. And so then it creates a double hurt. But yeah, I think that is really where the start of conflict comes from, is that, and then that choice. Like, do you feel betrayed or do you just feel hurt?
Right.
And can you express that? And if you trust that your partner is going to take care of that and understand that, and you don't need to try and make them do something in response to it, then it's not going to escalate to the point. But then what about the issue of, well, I mean, I guess we could also talk about how men and women handle it differently, or what women's complaints are about men and men's complaints about women in conflict. I think that might make sense. Otherwise, we could say that I was going to say, like, what happens then from that point forward when someone brings up a hurt, and how do they respond?
Yeah. I mean, I think what happened in my brain when you were just describing it is that I know that they say like everyone has something in their childhood that like caused them some sort of trauma, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and I do believe that.
Right.
And I think, when we get old enough, we're out on our own. We have to figure it out on our own.
Right.
We maybe had to figure it out on our own when we were even still young, And so I feel like everyone defaults to protect yourself, because at some point you are the only one that can do it.
Right. Yeah.
So, and you learn that. And so I feel like it can be hard, and some people never learn it.
Right.
Like, let's be real. Some people have conflicts all the time, the way that we're talking about, where it like escalates and it's messy, but they never learn to be vulnerable and to look out for someone else's heart over their own, because it is hard.
Right.
Like, it is hard to unlearn that thing. Right. And it's also like, the reality of it, like this person could still leave, this person could do this, like, so there is still that like knowledge that probably makes people hold on to wanting to protect themselves, because that's all they can control and that's all they feel like they can do.
Yeah.
But I do agree that like this is the only way really to not have like explosive conflicts, and actually like get to the root of problems and actually work through them, and not really have to deal with them very much after you've had a helpful and like healing conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah, that just like popped into my head when you were talking about it, because it kind of, I think it's important to kind of maybe theorize where it comes from, because this is something that I feel like every single person I know has had a conflict that has like been blown out of proportion, right? Like at some point. And you can't always say the right thing.
Right.
Sometimes it still goes, a certain type of way. So
because you can't know what the right thing, because you don't know what someone's trauma is, so something that might be innocent to you, that's even meant in a good way, might come across the other. So you can't rely on, and you also at the same time can't expect your partner to say things the right way, because they're not a mind reader.
Well, I think you can expect to not if you've had a conversation where like you don't talk bad about the other person or like call names or yell, like you can establish those things.
Right.
But like you said, there are still things that someone's going to be triggered by or offended by that you might not necessarily be, because of their own past, their own trauma, like what they've been through. And like, obviously we all need to work towards healing those things, but we're all human. So things are going to happen. But yeah, I think just when you were explaining it, I think it's important before we got into the other parts to kind of look at it from that perspective. Cause I don't think like, I think it's just our learned behavior, like that we've learned from growing up. And that when you get in a relationship and you get married, that you have to, like, especially when you're married, you have to trust your decision that you made, right? Because you should be taking the time to make the right decision, or like thinking about it enough to feel like I could put my entire life in your hands and trust that you're going to take care of me, right? But I think when we're upset and we're hurt, we're like, and especially if it's by that person, we're like, how am I going to give my heart to this person that heard it, right? So
yeah, it's a hard thing,
but I think that's why like remembering who you actually married or who you're actually in a relationship with and who they are to their core and the things that they show you by what they say and what they do is very important to remember in those moments, because it's very easy to allow your emotions and your hurt and whatever to override that and be like, okay, well now I'm coming at him because he hurt me.
Right.
So like now I got to defend myself from him.
Right. And that's I think that's the key thing that causes the conflict to escalate is the defense. Defense. And if you look at it, because when we've had discussions, right, you've said being defensive. That's the thing that I need to stop doing. And then
I'm defensive.
right. And then it's like, but even the act of saying stop being defensive is kind of defensive. You know what I mean? It's like, because both of those, and what it comes down to is the motive of trying to protect yourself,
right,
as opposed to trying to love the other person, which again, it's like I said, I am just as guilty of it as anyone is, because that's our default. Like we were just having the conversation with Sophia, the other night, and I was telling her about how, like, well, this girl at school, if she says something, she says you're helpless, or she says something like that, then just don't fight it. There's no need. Like, that's just her, what she thinks, and there's no need to, like, to fight against that or to defend yourself.
Right.
Just let it be what it is. Or if she points out a mistake that you made and she says it in the wrong way, then just acknowledge, just say, you're correct, I did make that mistake. You don't have to, it doesn't matter that she has this opinion or that she's expressing things
right.
in the wrong way. It's when you become that.
But
that
I think
defensive.
Our ego wants us to prove ourselves.
It does.
Right?
It
like
does,
that's really what it is.
Right.
Then at that point, because, why, like you said, why would you even say anything? Like, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
But to your ego, it does.
Right.
Right. And so you're like, no, I need to tell this person this is who I actually am, because they have the wrong idea of me. But in reality, like, you could talk till you're blue in the face and a person could be committed to misunderstanding you.
Right.
And that is also where conflict can get stretched out, because you do end up being committed to your point of view. You get committed to being your point of view, and then nobody's really budging.
Well,
you're talking in circles, because, like, it's the same thing over and over and over.
Yeah.
Because you're just worried about defending your point of view and yourself, and then you're just worried about defending your point of view and yourself, and so nothing is actually, like, it's not working together. And that's why I think a lot of, like, psychologists or whatever would say, like, work as a team to fight against the issue.
Right.
And like that is true. And it can be hard. But I think when you, like, look at it, where if you're being defensive and the other person's being defensive, you're not working together as a team. Now you're battling against each other. Right. Rather than being on the same side. Right. And, coming from a place of love and understanding and, like, trying to stay connected amongst that. Because that's also hard to do. And especially, like, if you grew up and you didn't have that, again, that's something you have to, like, learn how to, like, stay connected when there is disagreement or conflict, because, a lot of people don't have that. Yeah. Like, as their automatic. Better than perfect, we stand.